And so joining me now to talk about the developments in Texas is religious liberty attorney and newly elected Texas School Board member Hannah Smith. Hannah, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thank you so much for having me.
And congratulations on your election.
Thank you.
Now, let me just start right there. What prompted you? I know you're a religious liberty attorney. I think you've been on the program before talking about religious liberty cases. What prompted you to run for the local school board?
Well, I have 4 kids in the school district, all the way from first grade all the way up to 9th grade. And we moved to Southlake for this amazing school district. As many families do from all over the country, they moved to Southlake because of our award-winning schools. And so I became particularly concerned last fall when it became apparent that our school district was contemplating enacting a program called the Cultural Competence Action Plan. And many parents in our school district became very concerned last fall, and we banded together and we started doing open records requests and finding out more information. And we started pushing back by making public comments in board meetings and doing other things. And so that naturally sort of led into my campaign for school board when 2 open seats presented themselves in January.
So how many conservatives are now on the school board?
So there's 7 members of our school board. 2 of them are conservative. One of them did not run again. And so there's now, after we get elected onto the school board this next week, there will be 3.
So there seems to be a lot of interest in these local elections because this, if I'm not mistaken, it was like 3 times the turnout in this election. I mean, it was a huge turnout for the election, which tells me that people are very, very concerned about what's happening in the schools.
Exactly. So we had a record number of voters turn out. It was something like 3 times as many as usual. I think the numbers are usually in a municipal election when there's not a presidential. It's around like 3,000 to maybe 3,500 voters that turn out. But this last Saturday, we had up to 10,000 voters turn out for this election. So it was really a phenomenal response by our community. They turned out to say no to these radical philosophies being injected into our school district. And they turned out to support all 5 of the conservative candidates, 2 candidates for school board, 2 candidates for city council, and 1 candidate for mayor.
And I want to talk about that in just a moment, but I want to stick with the because I want to talk about the city council and the mayor, but I want to delve a little deeper into what happens next when it comes to this curriculum that so many parents are concerned about that prompted this type of engagement. How do you get this out of the school system?
So the Cultural Competence Action Plan was named by a national nonprofit that does education rights work across the country. They deemed this program the most radical program they had seen in the K through 12 area, anywhere in the entire country. And that's really saying something because they've seen a lot of different programs from parents all over the country who've come to them to complain and say, how can we, get this out of our schools? It was a 34-page plan that had microaggression tracking in it and punishment of microaggressions, which were defined as subjective, intentional or unintentional offenses that were deemed offensive by the alleged victim. They also included in the plan really invasive teacher training based on critical race theory. They also wanted to include a metric in job performance reviews for teachers that would rate them based on their level of cultural competence as to whether or not they could keep their job. They wanted to do student club audits where they would review all of these student clubs on campus, including the religious ones, and rate whether or not they were culturally competent. And if they weren't, then they would not be able to stay on campus, most likely. And they also had metrics in there for affirmative action like programs to try and increase our reach into different populations for our teachers and staff. So there were a lot of elements to this plan that were just deeply disturbing. The word equity was used over 120 times in this plan, which really tells you that this was a plan based on critical race theory. Equity, of course, is all about achieving certain results rather than providing equality of opportunity. And so that's why we were really troubled with this particular plan. Of course, none of us think that any of our students should be subjected to harassment or bullying or racism or any form of discrimination. That's just not acceptable. But we weren't on board with a plan that adopted this kind of philosophical approach to teaching our kids that the color of their skin is really all that matters.
You know, Hannah, as you describe that, Southlake, Texas is well, to say it's red is an understatement. I mean, it's a very conservative area. If that was in the school district there, I can imagine what parents across the country would find in other jurisdictions if they opened the hood and looked into what was happening there in their public education system. I think they, too, would be shocked. So as this new school board, these are two school board members, as you go onto the school board and you take up this issue, are you expecting a lot of resistance?
No, I'm not actually, because we have a brand new superintendent. Our former superintendent retired after many, many years at our district. And so we have a brand new superintendent. And I am hopeful that he will want to start a new chapter. There have already been some changes in some of his upper level management positions right beneath him at the assistant superintendent level. So he's bringing in some new people. He's, shaking things up a bit. And I know that he has heard loud and clear that our community is not okay with this kind of thing. And certainly the election sent a very big message to the school district. 70% of the voters voted for the conservative candidate. So it really was a mandate. It was a message that was sent to the district that this is not okay.
Hannah, I want to transition for a moment to the city council, where two city council seats were taken by conservatives, the mayor's seat. What was happening there?
So we have a really well-run city. Southlake is sort of the jewel of North Texas. People come literally from all over the country to come to Southlake because it's such a great place to live and raise a family. And so our city government has been really well run for the last several years. We have not had the kinds of problems in our city management that we have had in our school district. So luckily, the city council, the mayor, all of that is in really good hands. And with these new three people who were elected to the city council and mayor's office, we'll continue to see some really great leadership in our city.
So Hannah, my take on this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that, people are seeing what's happening in Washington, D.C. They're seeing what kind of policies are being pushed onto the local level. And this is kind of the first line of defense, for your children, is you step in between them and what's coming through the education system. So parents are saying, you know what, I might not be able to change Congress. I might not be able to affect the state legislature. But you know what? We got a school board, we got a city council, and we got to do what we can to push back. If others won't, we will. Is that an adequate read on what took place there?
I think that's exactly what took place. I mean, I think after the results of last fall, and particularly the things that were happening in our school district, I think, a lot of our community thought we've been asleep. We haven't been paying attention to what's going on in our schools. And I think a lot of this actually has to do with the coronavirus as well, because, with all the kids that were home at school in quarantine this last year, parents were much more involved in the education of their kids. They were seeing on their children's laptops and computer screens what was going on in the classroom. And for some of them, it was the first time they had really clued in to what the teachers were teaching and what was happening online. And a lot of them realized that there are some really insidious resources online that are teaching critical race theory and other things to our kids. And so that awareness, I think, was heightened because they just had a much closer view to what their kids were doing online and in class. And so I think that that coupled with the Biden administration's radical policies, coupled with the CCAP, coupled with feeling like, they needed to wake up and really take control of their local school boards and all of that, I think it all just came together to mean that we had just an amazing turnout at the polls that really sent a huge message.
All right, Hannah Smith, here's the big question. We've got moms, dads all across the country listening to this saying, you know what? I'm not happy with what's happening here. I'm concerned about my children. I saw what is happening in their classroom. I got a glimpse of that curriculum. How difficult is it to take this step to run for the school board?
It's not difficult. You just have to file some paperwork, but really you need to have an army behind you. We have an amazing community that rallied behind me and behind Cam Bryan, who was running in place 4. And they were the ones who volunteered to go knocking on doors and passing out flyers and calling and texting their neighbors and organizing meet and greets and doing all of the things at the grassroots level that you have to do to have a successful campaign. So really, it's about creating that network of people who care as passionately about it as you do, so that all of you together can effectuate the change. And that's really what you have to do.
Did churches get involved in promoting these messages and helping people get registered and turning out to vote?
There were churches in our area that encouraged their parishioners to go and vote. And some even, said, we have some people in our congregation who are running, so please support them. We did have an outreach to some interfaith leaders in our community where we reached out to them and said, you should be concerned about the CCAP because it has implications for religious kids in the district and certainly for our student religious club. So we did a lot of outreach to the interfaith community to make sure that they were aware of the issues, and they really did support us in encouraging their parishioners to get out to the polls.
So bottom line, Hannah, other communities can do this as well.
They can. You just have to be really coordinated and have a lot of people behind you. We had a political action committee that was formed that helped in the election. Certainly, we had a huge amount of community volunteer work. We had candidates that were willing to really campaign hard for 3.5 months. And we had an amazing electorate that just turned out in force to say enough is enough.
Well, I thank God that they did, and I thank you for making yourself available to serve in this capacity. And again, Hannah, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
All right.